if it goes down to Camp A versus Camp B, saan ka tataya? The only survey so far we have, although my understanding is there are other surveys coming in, is really from Okta. And if you look at the Okta survey, down to 15% na lang ang DDS camp in fourth quarter of last year, around October, and most likely pababa yan at pababa. And if tuloy yung impeachment ni Sara, baka 3% na lang yan. And the reason I use the word 3%, medyo pang-asar yan, because I remember there was a SONA that Digong gave, and sa sobrang yabang niya, the height of his hubris, sabi niya, balita ko, 3% na lang yung ayos sa atin, ganon, di ba? So this was referring to some of the surveys that were suggesting Duterte has, I don't know, 90+% approval and a few percent on this side and a few percent against him. You know, I'll be absolutely honest about it. I never questioned popularity of Duterte, but I always said you have to put that popularity into context. First of all, the idea of Filipino presidents having 50, 60, 70% approval rating. If you look at the SWS, net approval rating, net satisfaction ratings of presidents throughout the period, hindi sobrang layo si Digong sa mga dating presidente. And in fact, we are a tropical nation, so extended yung honeymoon periods natin. There are times that our presidents enjoy majority approval rating year after year after year. But one thing that was different with Duterte is that there was a fear factor. And I think this is where medyo nagkaroon tayo ng hidwaan with some of our friends in the survey industry, because they felt na I was questioning their methodology. No, I never questioned their integrity. I was always a great defender of good friends and colleagues in Pulse Asia, SWS. I think they're legitimate. They're good and honest people. At the same time, I cannot deny that there are studies, there are academic studies, including by a couple of very high-level Japanese scholars of the Philippines, which show that actually kung tinignan mo yun, there was always a fear factor. This idea that there's tokang right and left sa barangay mo, there are tens of thousands of people na pinatay under questionable circumstances. And then someone comes to you and asks, gusto mo ba si Digong or ayaw mo kay Digong? Honestly, ano bang incentive mo para sabihin mo ayaw mo kay Digong? So I always felt Duterte's popularity was inflated because of the fear factor. And that's precisely why we see the Duterte magic, supposedly the Duterte magic or dark magic, is showing tremendous amount of vulnerability right now. Really tremendous amount of vulnerability right now. So if you look at Sara Duterte's satisfaction and approval ratings, ang laki ng baksak niya throughout the years. Her net approval rating, for instance, in Pulse Asia quarter 4 of last year was just over 20%. Even in Visayas and Mindanao, one of their core strength areas, there were double-digit declines, more than 10% decline in Mindanao, close to 20% decline in Visayas. And in NCR region, barely a quarter of people approve of Sara Duterte. So wala na yung fear factor. Wala na yung resources of the state. Wala na yung mga midnight rants of Digong and all of those weird charisma that he was able to develop in the climate of fear. So sa aking palagay, once the fear factor was gone, dun lumabas talaga kung talaga popular ang mga Dutertes. That's what I'm saying. When many people say love na love ang mga taga Davao ang mga Dutertes, I always remind them, how much of that is also about fear, right? The reason I'm saying that is because I've visited countries like North Korea. I've been in China. I'll visit China soon. I've been to many authoritarian countries, and I know in authoritarian countries, people internalize fear. And people always have a reason to convince themselves that they rather be on the safe side of things. And completely for understandable reason. Completely for understandable reason. So yun yung sinasabi ko na there are two types of errors we have to avoid. Type 1 error, false positive. Type 2 error, false negative. So the false positive is, essentially inflating or overestimating the popularity of Duterte's. Now, having said that, I am not underestimating the Duterte magic. It has some base in Vismin, especially in Mindanao, because of historical injustices, because of the whole Imperial Manila neglect of Mindanao discourse, because of the horrible wars and conflicts in Mindanao. Yes, given na yan. There's, of course, also some religious groups, including one that had a 1 million-strong peace rally the other month, who are aligned with the Dutertes. There are some ex-generals and soldiers and servicemen and officials who benefited from Duterte's patronage, who are very loyal to him at Sobrang ingay nila ngayon na pa-revgov sila ng pa-revgov and all of that. So yeah, there are some pillars of support for Dutertes, but let's not inflate that. And as far as Sara Duterte is concerned, I'm sorry, don't use the gender card, right? When we criticize Sara Duterte, it's not about her gender. It's about her behavior. It's about her competence or lack thereof. And when we talk about her satisfaction and all, yes, I do believe, unfortunately, we still have an element of misogyny in our country, that expectation for men are different from expectation for women. And that when women project strength, it's unfortunately sometimes filtered and ricocheted through the prism of patriarchy. Hindi ko dinideny yan. But please lang, wag gamitin yung gender card to deflect criticism from Sara Duterte or demonize people who criticize Sara Duterte legitimately. I mean, for heaven's sakes, que horror. Where on earth do you find a vice president openly threatening to assassinate the president, the first lady, the speaker of the house? I mean, that's crazy. Yung sasabihin na hukayin niya yung bangkay ng... That's crazy. And saying that's crazy is not sexist. I'm sorry. That's just crazy, period. Now, hindi ko alam what the hell is going on there. I'm not a psychologist or psychoanalyst. To be honest, I would have wanted to become a doctor in psychoanalysis, but hindi ako magaling sa chemistry. Long discussion, so eventually I shifted course. I started pre-med, right? A part of me always wanted to be a psychiatrist, but I'm not good in chemistry, so I felt that would be my problem down the road if I want to go at the highest level, especially in places like UP Manila, among others. Medyo mataas ang expectation, lalo yung mga advanced chem. But anyway, I don't want to go to that. My point here is the Duterte magic is not as invincible as people think, and actually, the Duterte core base is a shrinking minority. Never forget that. It's a shrinking minority. That is why it's important, right, for everyone to be clear that while we should not underestimate them, we should not also overestimate them. Therefore, we should be clear dun sa issue ng impeachment. That's extremely, extremely important, that we should be clear on the issue of impeachment. Because sa aking palagay, unfortunately, we have friends who are dilly-dallying on the issue of impeachment or dismissing the issue of impeachment as just political or saying let's not too much discuss the issue of impeachment dahil, this will just distract us from all the important issues. This might give a free pass to the administration. This might distract us from fiscalizing the current administration, the worst budget ever, yung mga ganun na discourse. So, I mean, no one is saying stop criticizing this administration. Go ahead. I criticize this administration. Maharlika fun issue. We can have a long conversation. Even on foreign policy, I think it's important that we have a healthy distance from Americans, especially with Trump right? Basically, Trump and transactionalism and all of that. I think we have to have much more diversified foreign relations. I think we have to have strong direct communication channels with China and make sure we have a seat at the table and don't end up on the menu of great power, grand bargain. Yes, mahabang usapan yan. We can have the discussion separately. But for me, the issue of impeachment is absolutely essential because it's a question of political conviction and it's a question of political urgency. I'm not sure there'll be other opportunities to hold the Dutertes accountable in the way we have right now. And looking at the case of populist comeback in Italy under Silvio Berlusconi and its progenitors, Meloni, Salvini, I can go on and on about Italian politics. If you look at Trump's comeback in the case of the United States, you can never underestimate the populists. When the populists survive a crackdown, and especially if that crackdown or pushback is sloppy, they come back stronger than ever. That's very, very important to keep in mind. So, sa aking palagay, this is a historic opportunity right now to hold the Dutertes accountable. And if this opportunity passes through the fingers of people who want accountability or people are distracted with old fights and old narratives and deracinated discourses, then good luck na lang sa atin lahat, diba? Now, this is why I feel we're also in an unprecedented moment because this midterm election is important in another way. this midterm election is going to set the tone for what's going to happen in 2028. Let's just be brutally honest. This is probably the tightest ever Senate race I know of. And just the other day, I was having a conversation with some data analytics people from San Francisco, and they were asking my advice on this issue. So just for purpose of transparency, I'm open. I do provide consultancies and support to some of what I believe are legitimate studies and analytics. And they were saying, ang hirap i-predict yung Senate race sa Pilipinas kasi sobrang daming mga artista, celebrities na well-resourced and well-oiled. And of course, you're talking about, more than 60 candidates fighting over 12 slots. So even if they were very accurate in predicting the U.S. elections almost perfectly, all the battleground states, they did pretty well in predicting the direction of the Indian elections last year and Indonesian elections. They would say, nahihirapan sila dito sa Senate race sa Pilipinas. Now, the good news is that according to the Third Eye, for instance, I think that's the name, right, of this AI analytics, actually pasok sila Bam and Kiko sa top 12. But it's a very volatile situation, right? And if you look at from essentially number 8 to number 28, right, ang dami mga malalaking pangalan dyan. So it's a very volatile situation up and down. So for me, the challenge siguro for progressive opposition, genuine opposition, is as much as I know they don't like the Marcos administration, and some of them, well, especially if your name is Aquino, obviously you don't want to be seen as aligned to the Marcos administration. I understand all of those things. And there are reasons to be, to be strong on questions of historical accountability among others. Yes. But I think we have to be also honest that this is a historic opportunity to hold one of the most notorious political dynasties anywhere on earth accountable. I mean, in comparative terms, I've been in every corner of the world almost, right? And I can tell you, when I look at the history of other countries in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Central Asia, in Europe, there are very few parallels to the Dutertes and the kind of governance they have, the confidential funds, the tens of thousands of EJKs, allegedly, the alleged selling out of the country, no respect whatsoever for decorum, for religious values, no respect whatsoever for sa mga kababaihan, sa mga ibang opisyales, like total brazen, Oriental despot, essentially classic archetype Oriental despot style of leadership in the 21st century. I mean, it's an embarrassing kind of leadership. It's not only morally questionable, it's embarrassing and it's incompetent. And it's anti-constitutional. Wag natin kalimutan, guys, ang Pilipinas ay isang constitutional democracy. Ibig sabihin, hindi lang ito usapin ng sino mas maraming vote. It's not the number of votes. It's whether you follow the Constitution, because this is about rule of law. It's not rule of numbers. Hindi ito tyranny of majority. Tyranny of majority means that, I got a lot of votes, so I can do whatever I want. Oh, by the way, actually, Duterte only got 16 million votes. And the only reason why Sara Duterte got more than 30 million votes is because it was a combined force with the Marcoses, including the Solid North, who, by the way, now are all against the Dutertes. Like, good luck. Good luck being a DDS going to, maybe not Baguio, but going to Lawag, Batak, right? Some parts, Santa Maria, whatever. Good luck sa'yo kung pro-DDS ka. Good luck kay Sara or Baste to go to those regions, right? At least alam ko sa Mindanao, maraming mga Ilocanos dyan. Mga military, ex-military people. No, but seriously, actually, I've heard many, literally on our YouTube, on our different channels, we had many folks who are saying, I'm pro-BBM, I'm Solid North, whatever, but I'm willing to vote for Bam and Kiko and Heidi Mendoza and Luke and whatever because actually, si Heidi Mendoza, gustong-gusto nila si Heidi Mendoza, yung mga ibang Solid North, not because Heidi Mendoza is pro-Marcos, it's because Heidi Mendoza ay matapang. Klarong-klaro yung position ni Heidi Mendoza on issue of confidential fund. Love na love nila yan. And they're willing to support not only Kiko, but also an Aquino if they feel that there will be good fiscalizers, that they will hold Sara Duterte accountable, that they will be a counterbalance to the Robin Hood Padilla, to the Bato, and those kinds of people. It's very, very important to keep that in mind. So you have a complete openness, right, of possibilities that was not there before. And this is what's more important. If the opposition gets 1 or 2 senators in, perfect. But it's not just that. It's also making sure that yung Team China will not get too many people in. Because numbers game na yan eh. Once the impeachment trial proper and voting gets started, right? Numbers game yan. And we're realistically looking at the next Congress for that. Kasi si Kilai's life is not willing to, ayaw niyang hawakan to, ayaw niya i-push to because he just doesn't have that power and pizzazz, right? So probably we'll have to wait for Tito Soto or someone else to Senate to get the ball rolling. So having said that, guys, this is a historic opportunity and it's also a chance to build the momentum for 2028. Because sa aking palagay, if opposition, progressive forces, centrist, anti-Duterte, whatever, solid north even, like if all of them do good enough in these elections, dominate these elections, set the tone, set the parameters, clarify ano yung mga baseline na acceptable. Ayaw namin ng Team China, ayaw namin ng ganito, ayaw namin ng pro-EJK, ayaw namin ng tuta ng ganyan. Kung klarong-klaro tayo dyan, that sets the tone for 2028, and the 2028 race for me, guys, is extremely open. Lenny 2028, very possible. Of course, Lenny's focus right now is on Naga, sorry. Hindi siya Nega. Very positive siya. Naga, her focus on Naga, and I think she'll do very well in Naga, and I am absolutely sure there'll be a lot of call for her to run. Riza Ontiveros, the de facto leader of the opposition, genuine opposition, at the very least, vice presidency. The Tulfos, at least Rafi Tulfo is already leading the pre-election surveys. If not Sara, maybe Robin Hood will run. I mean, who knows? The 2028 elections could be like the elections that saw Ramos win by very slim margin, and some perhaps believe that actually talaga dapat nanalo dyan si Miriam Defensor, right? With just barely 20% of the votes, right? Ramos won it with just over 20% of the votes. So, speaking of that, guys, the possibilities look very good. But possibilities become reality if you do the right thing. Kaya sa akin palagay, etong elections ay mahalaga because I think this is a time for experimentation. This is a time for pushing the envelope. Wag magpa-safe, wag magpa-cute, wag go with something that has not been tried and has not been tested. Go with something that is disruptive enough to give people a sense of excitement, a sense of investment, and a sense of a better future. Going back again to the Okta survey, 40% ng ating kababayan ay either non-aligned or completely switched off. So if you can get at least half of that on your side, pasok ka na sa Senado. Or at least you'll be very competitive for actually, not necessarily. I mean, you need around 35 to 40% to be competitive for Magic 12. But if you can get some of here, some of there, and that 7% of liberal, I don't know, part of the solid north, and most important, among the independents, if you can get half of them, you might put together 30, 35, 40%. And more importantly, you might build the momentum for a presidential race, vice presidential race, come 2028. And, knowing President Marcos Jr., I mean, my understanding of him is that he's a practical guy, ayaw niya ng gulo. That's why he has been very calibrated in terms of responding to the Dutertes over the past few years. I won't be surprised if he may be even open to some sort of a grand coalition down the road, including, who knows, maybe a Bam Aquino for vice president. I think if Bam wins the Senate, makes it a Senate, I think Bam will run for vice president, probably with Lenny. So, ang dami mga possibilities siyan. And with all of those good possibilities down the road, I think it's tremendously important for us to have clarity in communication and political conviction. I think to have political conviction, to have clarity in strategic communication pays off. And for me, mas mahalaga pa dyan is audacity. Audacity is extremely, extremely important. This is an era, this is the age of disruption. Some of you may have attended or have watched my mini lecture at the mini lecture. 2 hours is actually a mini lecture for me because a proper lecture for me is like 4 hours discussion. This is the age of disruption. This is an age whereby Tesla comes out of nowhere and suddenly BYD comes out of nowhere and knocks it out. This is an era whereby ChatGPT comes out of nowhere and then DeepSeek comes out of nowhere and kicks the heck out of ChatGPT. This is an era whereby NVIDIA beats the hell out of everyone and then suddenly loses 60% of its shares. 6% of its value, right? Because people realize actually you can do high-end, semiconductor, or you can do high-end processing, way cheaper than what NVIDIA and the big tech companies in America would suggest. This is an era whereby Trump, who was considered a washed up, marginalized demagogue 4 years ago, is now suddenly a global figure and some would argue the most influential figure of the early 20th century. This is an era whereby Elon Musk goes from a Democrat, climate change friendly guy to now being essentially the prince of the MAGA movement, right? This is an era that someone like J.D. Vance, whose book we used to read, whose interviews we used to watch to understand, the decline of the Democratic vote in the Rust Belts, now suddenly being the face of this kind of right-wing MAGA kind of a Catholic kind of discourse, right? So, my goodness, this is an age of disruption, and as they say, fortune. Fortune befits the brave, right? Fortune favors the disruptor. That's how I'm gonna put it, right? And when we say disruptor, hindi yung nanggugulo ka lang for the sake of manggugulo ka lang. No, we're talking about you're pushing the envelope because you realize the status quo is not working. You're pushing the envelope because you realize that people want something new, something good, something excitable. You're pushing the envelope because you realize in our own informational ecosystem, ang hinahanap ng tao nowadays is someone who excites, who inspires you, and someone na hindi takot, hindi pa cute, hindi pa safe, but someone who's still a steady hand, a responsible person. So my advice always is, in the realm of politics, defend institutions, defend the rule of law, but do not defend a broken status quo. Push for structural transformation. Be the change you want to see in the world, right? If you believe in structural transformation, then be also a disruptor. You have to show that you're willing to push the envelope. Otherwise, it will be the Elon Musk way of doing things. Otherwise, it will be the Trump way of doing things, right? And this brings me really to the final part of my discussion. Kasi dito, ito na, kuya talk na to. Medyo kuya talk na tayo. Last time we had this with our good friend Kristan. And thank you for all the fantastic responses dun sa conversation namin with Kristan about healthy lifestyle, what is masculinity, genuine masculinity versus what is toxic masculinity. So in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I want to talk about things closer to heart, right? And things that I think all of us can relate to, whether you're interested in politics or not. And sa totoo lang, I don't think I would have been able to do what I'm doing right now, which is almost every day, at least once, if not 2 or 3 times, doing vlogs and interviews while writing articles, while working on books, while teaching, while giving lectures all around the world. I don't think I would have done all of these things if I didn't have a deep, a profound sense of urgency, a profound sense of conviction that we really have to inspire a new perspective about not only our country, but also about the world. More importantly, I would say, is also about the pains and setbacks that I have suffered throughout the years. And sige, magkape muna ako kasi medyo kailangan maglagay ng dramatic music. Then, don't worry, hindi ito hugot about love, life, and all. Sorry. No. And please, stop saying, tumatanda ka na, kakasal ka na, please, okay? Don't pressure me, okay? Everything will come in its right time. But sorry, it's not my priority right now to settle down. It's not. Sorry, it's not a priority. My priority is serving my country in the best way I can. My priority is to juice out the most I can while I'm still, quote-unquote, young. And per the World Economic Forum definition, young means under 42 or under 40. So we still have half a decade, right? As quote-unquote young person. So I wanted to really juice out the most I can because, well, idol natin mga Rizal types, di ba? Rizal by my age, actually he didn't even make it to, mid-30s, right? So Rizal, almost at my age, had already produced so much. So we are in the shadow of people like Rizal and these great ilustrados. And imagine the people who led revolutions back in the day were in their 20s and 30s, right? Alexander the Great was in his early 20s and mid-20s when he already had conquered half of the known world or half of the so-called Western world, Persia, parts of India, and Southern Europe, Mediterranean. So I always I'm not saying I'm great or anything like that, but I was always inspired by these people. Now, there's more to life than just ticking the boxes. Oh, by this age, kakasal ka na. By this age, maging ano ka. By this age, hatid sundo, BMW, bring my wife here. Sorry, it's not my priority right now. Okay, so don't worry. This is not a hugot about love life or anything like that. Although, just like any other human being, of course, may mga hugot tayo sa love life. So I've had many disappointments. I've had many heartbreaks. I've been in many long-term relationships, including long-distance relationships. Obviously, they didn't work. That's why I'm not married right now. But I think I also learned a lot from those failures to be the best version of myself, in a sense that I do not want to be defined as a person in the context of being with someone else. I think the someone else should literally be a kind of an addition to your life, not the foundation of your life. Although, of course, I do read the scripture and I understand that once you get married and all, you are joined. Once you're joined by the Lord, you are one unit. Yes. Pero ibang usapan na yan. That's after marriage now. So at least that's my interpretation of the scripture. I do read my scripture. But going back to this, my mindset always is this, and I mentioned that last time. Ang advice ko sa mga kabataan, especially mga kalalakihan, because I think this is a great moment to be a woman. This is a great moment for folks in the minority groups, because after all, for everything people can say against woke stuff, in fairness naman, may boses ng mga kababaihan, may boses ng mga minority groups, LGBT groups, among other things, among other groups, diba? I believe they need to be given more voices, more platforms. They have to be empowered kasi structurally disadvantaged sila. I do believe in that. So in that sense, I am progressive. I am proudly progressive. At the same time, I also do realize, like, okay, so what happens now to young men, right? So ang advice ko sa young men always is this: you build yourself and they will come, right? Whatever is your preference, right? If you are successful in your career, if you project confidence, if you look like a winner, they will come for you. And in fact, all studies show you don't need to be, I don't know, Jordan Peterson or, I don't know, progressive version of Jordan Peterson, but you don't need to go into the whole literature in behavioral psychology or psychology of mating or whatever, or relationships, to realize that actually a lot of times people go for a certain individual, especially when we talk about heterosexual male. It's not only about what you are right now, but what you represent. Kung ang tingin sa'yo, this guy could be the next president of the Philippines, or this guy could be the next CEO, or this guy could be the next this and that, people are willing to invest their life in you. And people are willing to love you despite your imperfections now because they can see your trajectory down the road. Kaya parati kong sinasabi, build yourself and they will come. And of course, as you get older, in my case, mid-30s already, you should have already built some foundations to make yourself, let's be honest, your market value should go high at a certain point, right? So that's very important. But more recently, I also had a couple of posts about career advice. And career advice, I think, is very important because part of building yourself is having a proper understanding of how to grow as a professional, right? My beef with that whole Andrew Tate, whatever stuff, and is that these people, scammy people, I'll just be honest about it, these scammy people, I know Trump loves them and is putting pressure on the Romanian government to whatever, but the reason why those types of macho men or whatever make it is because they supposedly teach you the tricks of the trade, shortcuts. I'll tell you what, guys, true success, walang shortcut dyan. You have to work very, very hard. You have to have strong foundations. You have to do your study. You have to get the good diploma. You have to go to the good school as much as you can. And if you don't make it to school, it's okay. At least you work hard and become reliable and make the right connections. But of course, you also have to have the X factor, vision, looking at the long term. But more than that, you have to have a survival instinct. And this is where the works of Nassim Taleb, the great Lebanese-American mathematician, has been a source of inspiration for me. So Nassim Taleb talks about, so dalawang concept sa kanya ay napakasikat. One is the notion of black swans, meaning low probability, high impact events. Like, for instance, you can say the global recession, Great Recession 2007 and 8. You can even say the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, right? These are black swans, events that are very improbable, but once they happen, they're extremely high impact. And then there are also so-called gray swans and gray rhinos, which are like not totally improbable, quite probable, and also very impactful, right? Nassim Taleb also talked about another very important concept, anti-fragility. Anti-fragility is different from the idea of resilience. Ay na ko yung word ng resilience. Sa akin palaga yung resilience na yung word ng resilience, yan ang ginagamit ng mga trapos to essentially get themselves scot-free from their obligation of making sure matino yung ating city planning, matino yung urban planning, etc. Resilient naman mga Pinoy, okay lang. No. Let's not abuse resilience. Human beings by nature are built to survive against all odds, right? So for me, anti-fragility is a more appropriate concept because anti-fragility means not only do you survive adversity, you thrive on adversity. You grow out of setbacks and failures, right? Was it Edison who said something like, I never fail. It's just that I discover 1,000 ways that don't work, right? So that having that kind of anti-fragile attitude and perspective and mindset is very, very important, especially in our age of disruption. So I give a lecture about technology and powers. I talk about artificial intelligence, populism, and new Cold War. But there's the other side of this. This is about what kind of mindset you have to develop. And the mindset for me is anti-fragility. That's a very important concept. To be honest, I think we can come up with a better term than anti-fragility.